Welcome to the Strackhouse, a show about inspiring women making change. I'm your host, Sarah Strackhouse. Join us to hear their incredible stories. Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of the Strackhouse. Today we are talking inclusion. There's been so much information about race, about social injustice, and this conversation keeps coming up. So I wanted to bring on an expert who is also a badass woman, and she is an entrepreneur, and that's kind of our theme, this season. But I really wanted to bring you on, to talk about your business, how you kind of developed it and grew it. But I also think that you're a perfect person to also talk about, this aspect of everything going on right now. So you are the president of Intentional Inclusion.
Yes.
And I have here a little bit about your bio, and I just wanted to read this because I absolutely love this. That your talent is transforming conversations about diversity from a debate about politics and personality into a dialogue about relationships and results. I mean, that stuck out to me. That is powerful.
And what's really fascinating about that is a client gave me that language. One day a client was saying, one of the reasons we really love working with you is because you turn this debate that people are always having about politics and personality into a dialogue. And I was like, ooh, that's good. Like,
yeah,
in my
I'm
mind,
gonna use that, yeah.
I'm like, ooh, that's good. And I actually did say, can I use that in my marketing? And they said yes, and I've used it ever since.
I love that. Well, and I know that your passion is, taking people and you have here, take responsibility for building effective cross-cultural relationships that can help them achieve their personal and professional goals. And I think that is huge, especially in today's society. So first off, for those of you who don't know a little bit about Tracy, obviously wonderful woman, entrepreneur, also is constantly in the media. I mean, we were just talking before, media professional, I think at this point is safe to say. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into the business of inclusion and then how you started your business?
So it's fascinating because at some level, I was being trained to do this work at the age of 2 when my parents moved our black family into what had previously been an all-white neighborhood. And then in 4th grade, I was a part of the group of the students who helped to desegregate the schools in St. Louis.
Wow.
And then all along the way, through my entire life, every 3 to 5 years, I would find myself in a situation where I was in the minority, sometimes by race, sometimes by gender or profession or religion, but always that person who had to figure out a way to build a bridge. Mm-hmm. So I think in my entire life, I've had to learn to do that. And then I realized I had a gift to be able to help people have conversations and learn to do that themselves. So how I started my business was after spending 18 years in corporate, I loved helping people have really sensitive conversations. I loved helping people work more effectively together. And so I was all jazzed about team building and customer service and leadership. And I loved the company I worked for. I adored the boss I had, but it just felt like it was time for me to touch many different kinds of people in many different industries. So I took the leap, no contracts, no clients, just a lot of courage.
Oh, that leap of faith. I mean, what was that like when you expanded out and were able to reach that different group, more probably people, and kind of take matters into your own hands?
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like just in general, that's scary probably.
I loved it, and I was courageous, but it's funny because maybe I was too insane to be afraid. Because it just seemed so right. It seemed like that was my time. If I was going to take a big chance, that was my time to do it. And, and 7 years later, most businesses, new businesses, don't last 3 years, and definitely 7 years. So when I hit that 7-year mark, I was like, oh, this is fun. I think I'll keep doing this.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you. I know, I have had people fill out a form beforehand, so I kind of want to go off of some of this. I know you talked a little bit about some of the misconceptions about what you do. So can you tell us a little bit about what all that involves? And you have a what is mine to do? I mean, I think that was really interesting when I read that. So I want to find out more and tell our viewers a little bit more about that.
Okay, so there are really three things in that question. The first one is when I started my business, I was clear that I was going to be focusing on team building, customer service, and leadership development. What happened though was I had to do something that every entrepreneur has to learn to do, which was listen to the marketplace. So I was passionate about those three things. And to me, you couldn't be a great leader if you couldn't lead people who are different from you. To me, team building was about getting people who are different from one another to get on the same page going in the same direction. For me, customer service was about, in our multicultural, multi-ethnic world, being able to anticipate and provide service to all kinds of people. So client after client after client would tell me the reason they hired me over 3 other people was because I had an element in my proposal that included multi-ethnic or multicultural leadership, team building, or customer service. By the time I was in business 4 to 5 years, I noticed I was getting 95% of my business from referrals or repeat business. And they were telling other people when they referred me, oh, you're looking for diversity training? Call Tracy. And I would be like, oh, John told you to call me? What are you looking for? Diversity training. Oh, we don't really do diversity training, but tell me more because I have this great network. And then they would say, well, we've hired all these women and they're not, and we need to change our workplace and we need diversity training. And I'm hearing they need team building.
Right.
So after a few years of listening to the marketplace, I started marketing myself as someone who does diversity training because I did.
Right.
I just thought it was for a goal of something else. So that made a big shift. And then what I noticed in the remaining years is people confuse diversity and inclusion, that they think they're the same thing, whereas diversity is really recognizing that everyone's different. And then how we utilize those differences, we can create an inclusive environment.
Right.
Or not. And so mostly what I do now is 40% of my business is helping companies create an inclusion strategy. And then about 30% of my business is actually conducting training to help people build the communication, conflict resolution, and leadership skills they need.
I love that because that kind of is all, I mean, not to use the word inclusive, but all inclusive, like all encompassing. I mean, I think that to make a place feel like a happy, cohesive, safe environment for people, I mean, I think you hit on some of the most important topics.
Well, and the other misconception is if you say the word diversity, most people in their minds, if they haven't done any training, they think you're only talking about racism, or maybe racism and sexism. And occasionally racism, sexism, and homophobia or sexual orientation or something like that. And so people conflate and think diversity, oh, you're going to tell us all the things we're doing wrong and you're going to call us racist. And it's so much bigger than that.
Well, and I think, I mean, probably especially now, race is such a big topic right now. I mean, the conversation is huge. And like we talked about a little bit before, I mean, I think it can be a little bit scary for people because, maybe they haven't talked about race before, or maybe they're worried to say something that'll be offensive. Are they doing enough? Are they not doing enough? Should they be louder on social media? Should they, stand back and let other people, I think there are so many questions right now. But I think, and I think you agree, the conversation is happening.
The number one concern or fear that people have in talking about race or racism is they're afraid they're going to offend someone. So then they don't have the conversation and they don't learn and then they're stuck in silence.
Right.
So 5 years ago, after the Charleston murders, there were so many people saying, "Well, what can I do? What can I do? I've got to do something. This can't go on." And that was the seed that planted my Facebook group, What Is Mine to Do, to respond to race-based hatred and violence. And so that's the one place where I really focus in on race and not all the aspects of diversity that I usually work with my client organizations. And in the year 2020, it's going to be remembered for all of the things that came up that in the pandemic that revealed inequities in healthcare based on race, in access, in clinical outcomes, and then the series of race-based violence that occurred in the spring of 2020 and how we've been responding to it. And it's been so exciting to watch so many people raise their hand and say, enough is enough. I'm a white person and I don't believe that we have to live this way. I want there to be more equity, more unity, more harmony, and people are talking.
And more understanding. And I think that is one of the biggest things, is that, like you said, that conversation is going back and forth. And you know, I think it's been topics that have been brought up, you know, constantly. And I think it's just having that conversation and opening that door, I think, has been great. Obviously, there were a lot of terrible things that led up to why this conversation started, but I think it's incredible, and it kind of flows right into also what you do, is having that conversation, taking it away from politics and turning it into almost a human relationship thing, not just where do you see, you know, what are your policies on this or that. So
Right, and we know that this doesn't get healed just because of legislation.
Right.
And we can't blame the way that we are as a nation around this particular topic on any one person. And so really, what do we want? What kind of relationships do we want? What kind of business results do we want? And that means each one of us, every one of us, has to be willing to have conversations with people who are different from us and then figure out where we're going to go together.
What is your advice to, just if someone's hearing this and they're just really feeling like they have no idea what to do? Where should I go to educate? Should I say something? Who do I talk to? I mean, do you have, I know it's kind of hard to have like a blanket statement, but do you have any advice for those people that might be wondering, what do I do?
Well, it's funny because I was going to say, I don't have a blanket statement.
Right.
And then in my mind, it's like, oh, but you have one thing that you say all the time. It might as well be a blanket statement. So what I tell people to do is to give themselves a learner's permit. And then I link that to, remember when you started driving, you had been riding in cars or vehicles for 14, 15, 16 years. You'd watched a lot of people drive. In your mind, you thought you knew how to drive, and you studied the book, and the book gave you the rules. And so you took the test like, I'm ready to drive. And then you get behind the wheel, and you actually have to look in the windshield, look in the rearview mirror, check the side mirrors, wait, and don't have a manual transmission where you have to deal with that. And then when you stop like this, right? Because you don't realize you have to find the right pressure. Talking about racism is the same way. You're not going to know everything. You're not going to know the right way to do it. But if you give yourself a learner's permit, and then you find some people who you tell them, I'm not comfortable with this, I don't know how, I have some questions, will you talk with me? That's how you grow the muscle. And then the second thing that backs that up is we are in the 21st century. Google doesn't know everything, and sometimes Google gives you wrong or incorrect or incomplete information, but self-education, there's no excuse. So if I have a question about something, I want to go to Google and I want to do a search and I want to look for at least 5 different resources or sources. And then I'm going to see what the common element is, rather than just go to someone and expect them to tell me everything.
I like that. There's so many resources at our fingertips, and I know that you have a lot of resources too. Your website. I mean, you have a Facebook group. Can you tell everyone kind of where they can find out more about you as well?
Yeah, so the key place to find out about me is tracybrown.com, Tracy, no E's, no I's, tracybrown.com, because that's home base for all the different things that I do. And the Facebook group that is specifically about race-based hatred and violence is What Is Mine to Do group on Facebook, or there is a website, whatisminetodo.com. Yeah. But if you go to tracybrown.com and you scan down the page, you will find links to all the different fun things that I do.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. Well, I have a couple more questions for you before I let you go. You know, something I think that is really huge is that you've kind of started a new way at looking, or maybe not a new way, but you've kind of widened the conversation when it comes to race in the workplace, the word diversity. And I think that you getting the word out about that, and you do it with so much wisdom, which I think is something that you don't see quite that often. I mean, I think you go about it in such a logical and heartfelt way. And I kind of want to ask you what it took to get there. You know, did you run into hurdles when trying to create this incredible product?
It's really sad to admit that so often when people hear the word diversity, they also assume discrimination, deficiency, and they assume the only time you're supposed to talk about diversity is when there's a problem. So there must have been a lawsuit, somebody did something wrong, and that's why you're here. And so I actually have had challenges building my business sometimes because my approach is more proactive and more strategic and more based on communication, results, and relationships. And so there have been clients or contracts I did not get because I wasn't going in there with the confrontation and the anger,
the hammer,
and the right, you will do this way. And so that's been interesting, that I sometimes have either had to turn away from or not be selected because they're like, oh no, we don't want that. We just want you to come in and tell our people what to do because we want to check this box. And they didn't really want systemic change. So for me, it seems natural because I was an executive in a large company, I see systems and I see how the different parts of the organization fit together, and I have a long-term view. So that is one of the things that then makes me stand out in the marketplace, because the companies that are wanting that, the long-term view, wanting to create it and integrate it into everything they do, and it's not just recruitment, they're a good match. I'm a good match for them.
In theory, every company should want that, right?
In theory.
In theory, yeah. Well, I have one last question for you, and it's kind of a weird one, so if you need to take a second, you can think about it. If I knew you better, what would I ask you?
Oh, I love that question. Oh, if you knew me better, what would you ask me? 2 things. Okay. You would ask me what I do when I'm not working, and you would ask me what motivated me to write books. So those two. So what motivated me to write books, and now I've written a dozen of them, is that I had a kind of dream or vision, and I'm a speaker, and I heard someone in the dream, they were introducing me. I was backstage, and they were introducing me, and they were like, and our next speaker is Tracy Brown, and she is the author of 10 books. I had not written one book,
One book at that time?
And around the same time, three of my friends wrote books. And it was like, okay, I just kept getting this message. And so that motivated me to write books and to write them as resources, not for the New York Times bestseller list, but as resources that my clients could use to continue the message. And then what do I do when I'm not working?
Yes.
So I love the look on people's faces when they hear me say, oh, I roller skate twice a week.
Okay, yes, I'm happy you brought that up because I saw that in the notes and I was like, so on Friday nights I could catch you roller skating. That is amazing. And I feel like it's starting to get like a lost art almost, you know? I don't know the last time I was at a roller skating rink, partially because I'm, super clumsy, but I mean, that is amazing.
Yeah, so it's like, people who know me frequently are asking me about, well, when's the last time you went roller skating and how is it? And of course, we've had the pandemic in 2020, and so the rinks are open now, but they have been closed, So that's the first time in probably 20 plus years that I went 15 consecutive weeks without roller skating.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Do you have your own roller skates? Like, can you go outside?
I have my own roller skates,
Yeah.
and no, I do not skate outside.
Well, it's also hot in Dallas. It's so hot.
Yeah, but not on it's not on the concrete or anything
Yeah.
like that. But yes. So that's.
I love that. What a cool hobby. What a creative. I love that kind of out of the box. It sets you apart in amazing ways. You're already so unique and incredible in your own way, and so I love to add that to the list.
Yes.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. TracyBrown.com. That's where people can get your information about your books as well.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. All right, don't forget, all of her information is going to be in the captions and description. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, of course, all of your streaming platforms on audio as well. So we will see you next Wednesday.
If you'd like to nominate an inspiring woman, email me at sarahstrackhouse@gmail.com. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.